The other day I was sitting around watching a bit of TV, as one does, and I gazed up at my wall of art above the TV and there's a piece there of the Cheshire Cat. Now, I love the Cheshire Cat, one of my favourite characters in all of fiction. But that day I was gazing at his big, toothy, cheesy grin that he has and I thought to myself, I wonder what his skull would look like. And then I thought, maybe I can make one. So if you thought this channel couldn't get any more niche, think again, because in this episode of Skullywags Speculative, we're going to take a look at my best attempt at a taxonomically, anatomically and biomechanically plausible skull of the Cheshire Cat. Dr. Rex here, welcome to the Skullywag Lab where I break down the bare bones basics of skull science. Today, we're going to take a look at the skull of the Cheshire Cat, a legendary creature from the world of Alice in Wonderland. But first, I thought this would be a stellar opportunity to take a look at some of the skull biology of cats in general, and how this helped inform my decision-making process when designing the skull. Alright, so I have a few surface meshes here for reference. Now, this house cat did most of the work, so let's start there. So the general feelered bow plan includes a much shorter snout than the average carnivoran, and this is because their mode of prey capture involves delivering relatively high bite forces to very precise regions of their prey, typically around the nape of the neck of smaller prey or to the throat of larger prey. However, this reduction in face length for higher bite forces has come with some trade-offs in other functions. A shorter face can limit the amount of olfactory surface area, potentially making the sense of smell less effective. But it also limits room for cheek teeth, as in the premolars or molars. So this means that cats have lost most of their molars, and the molars that they do retain aren't used for like crushing or grinding behaviours the way they are in other animals. And this means that cats have a unique dental formula that consists of 3 incisors, 1 canine, 3 premolars at the top and 2 at the bottom, and of course that single molar at the back of each quadrant. This makes them highly specialised for hunting and slicing up other vertebrates, and pretty limited in feeding on anything else. The takeaway here is that cat skulls are built for killing, and they're built for cutting. They're definitely not built for chewing. Now, to help with detecting prey, they have these large forward-facing eyes, providing binocular vision, and these orbits are bordered by some well-developed processes. The postorbital process at the top, which wraps around to almost meet with the zygomatic process on the side here. Cats also have excellent hearing, with some evidence for this coming in the form of these large balloons of thin bone called the auditory bullae. These are generally associated with detecting lower frequency sounds. They're kind of like resonance chambers, but a lot more complicated. Now, another important landmark of sensation are these 2 large holes in the maxillary region, just between the orbits and the teeth here. These holes are called infraorbital foramina, and they're really important indicators for how good the sensation is in the cheeks and the lips. Generally, the larger these holes are, the better the animal can sense the environment through its whiskers, or vibrissae. Now let's take a look at how cat skulls change with size. Firstly, this adorable little skull belongs to the equally adorable itty-bitty Felis margarita, also known as the sand cat. A cat skull this size will tend to have a shorter button face for even higher bite forces to help it catch prey that, while small, are pretty big for this little guy. Similarly, he has wider cheeks to allow room for relatively chunkier temporalis muscles, which also allow for a stronger bite for his size. Smaller animals also tend to have relatively larger brains and eyes, which you can see here as well. At the other extreme, this tiger has a relatively smaller brain case and orbits, but also a bit of a longer face. This appears to be mostly due to its relatively chunkier teeth, which of course help them resist becoming broken or chipped if they bump into bones during biting, or if they get buffed by a giant buffalo hoof during a chase or something. Now, everything up to here has been legit cat anatomy, but from this point on, we're heading into Wonderland. So, let's finally drag the Cheshire Cat into the room, shall we? I went with a Tim Burton version for reference, but it doesn't really matter which one we pick, as they all have the similar diagnostic features. Those are a short, wide face with a big ol' smile, sporting lots of sharp teeth. The first thing you might notice about those teeth is that there appears to be a lot of them, and not quite in the correct numbers either. I mean, assuming these two teeth sticking out a bit further here are a pair of reduced canines, then he's actually missing an incisor per quadrant. So I had to fix that to make the skull taxonomically sound. But also, it looks like he has loads more cheek teeth than cats have. So I had to do something about that as well to make it more scientifically plausible. The other big difference is the facial proportions. This is owing to a super reduced button nose with extremely flared cheeks. This helps him make his iconic grin, but something else we should probably acknowledge is that cats lack the musculature to smile as we humans do. Cats and humans both have a facial muscle called the zygomaticus, but these have different evolutionary origins, with this muscle in cats instead helping them do things like bare their teeth or do their Fleeman response and things like that. For a cat to be able to smile like humans, its facial musculature would need a drastic change to its fundamental anatomy, with insertions of the zygomaticus at the oral commissures or corners of the mouth, like we see in humans. Thankfully though, we're just working on the skull, so we don't have to worry too much about that. With all of that out of the way, let's take a look at my humble attempt at creating a reasonably feasible skull of the Cheshire Cat. As you can see, extreme facial reduction has given this guy his tiny little button nose. This is kind of reminiscent of some super brachycephalic cat breeds like Persians. This might have led to him having almost no sense of smell, but that might actually be beneficial if the hygiene practices of other Wonderland characters aren't totally up to scratch. But nothing to fear, he might not be able to smell very much, but he can still definitely sense the environment around the immediate vicinity of his face, with his large infraorbital foramina providing space for well-developed sensory nerves of his whiskers. He also has his large auditory bullae, supporting his exceptional abilities to listen. I can only imagine the crazy things he might be able to hear through the dark forests of Wonderland. Some pretty wild low-frequency sounds would be around there for sure. He also has a generally really wide skull, and this has provided room for a relatively large brain, since, you know, he's a lot smarter than other cats, being that he can talk and stuff. The extreme widening of his face is achieved through this flaring of his zygomatic arches. Now, if he were to have received extreme modifications to his facial muscles to help him smile the way he does, his zygomaticus muscles would originate near his auditory meatus here and wrap around the zygomatic arches to insert onto his oral commissures, or the corners of his mouth. That sort of a configuration would give him the ability to make an extremely wide grin. Now let's take a look at that grin. 6 incisors at the top and bottom, as his feline ancestry demands, but I was also able to wrangle a pretty toothy grin from the standard cat dental formula as is, with one exception. He has an adorable pair of upper supernumerary P2 premolars. Cats are pretty much never born with additional molars like other animals can be, but they are sometimes born with additional premolars. Now this doesn't just give him a toothier grin that is scientifically sound, but it's also a nice little imperfection that adds some nuance to his character, and I really like that. What this gives us is a cat skull that looks extremely uncat-like in general shape. It's actually shaped a little bit more like an amphibian skull, like some temnospondyl's, but the pointy front teeth with sharp edges are also more like what we see in sharks than cats. So I guess these features might work for a cat that specializes in underwater prey capture, with the bonus dental artillery to slice hefty chunks off bigger animals. So would this make the Cheshire Cat Wonderland's cookie cutter shark? I don't know, but it's fun to think about. So as I was making this skull, I was imagining how cool it would be to be wandering the Wonderland forest late at night and seeing this skull materialize around his glowing eyes as he sings the verses from the Jabberwocky. Now that's my kind of trip.
Awesome.
So now when I'm sitting watching TV and I see that grin, I got a skull to put to the face. How good is that? And he 3D prints pretty well too. So I'm thinking I'm going to start lining my shelves with the skulls of fictional characters. So let me know your suggestions on who you think my next one should be. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next video.